I'm Ryan. I'm 30 years old, and I discovered my brother slept with my fiancée at her bachelorette party. Before I tell you how that one soul-crushing discovery led to the systematic and total annihilation of their perfect, curated lives, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know who I'm sharing this with. My story, the real story, begins just 1 month before the wedding. I'd spent 2 years of my life and a significant chunk of my savings planning. On the surface, life was a carefully painted picture of the American dream. I had a solid career as a financial analyst, a job that required a quiet, steady hand, something that defined me. I had a modest but comfortable house in a decent suburban neighborhood. And I had Emma, the woman I was about to promise my life to. Emma was sunshine. That's the only word for her. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in it. We'd been together 6 years, since a friend's barbecue where we talked for hours by the fire pit. Our life together felt pre-written, a gentle, predictable script. Marriage, a golden retriever, 2.5 kids, and growing old on a porch swing. I wasn't just content with that script. I craved it. But every picture, no matter how bright, casts a shadow. And the shadow that loomed over my entire life was my younger brother, Jason. If I was the steady, reliable Earth, Jason was the blazing sun that everyone orbited. He was the golden child, a title he wore with an effortless, infuriating swagger. He was charming, handsome, and skated through life on a winning smile and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. While I built my life brick by painstaking brick, Jason seemed to find fully formed castles waiting for him. And my parents? They were his most devoted worshippers. They saw his flash as brilliance and my quiet competence as, well, just quiet. The wedding preparations were a storm of activity. My life became a blur of cake tastings, seating charts, and tense conversations about floral arrangements. Emma's maid of honor, Tasha, was at the center of it all. Tasha was Emma's best friend, but she was the opposite of sunshine. She was a firecracker, loud and intense, someone who seemed to thrive on drama. She took charge of the bachelorette party with a worrying level of enthusiasm, promising Emma one final night of glorious chaos. I remember her smirking at Jason during a family dinner. "Don't you worry, Jason," she'd said, winking. "I'll make sure your big brother's girl has a night she'll never forget." I should have seen it, the way she said it, the look in her eye. But I was a man in love, blinded by the bright future I thought was just weeks away. I trusted them. That was my fundamental mistake. The night of the party, I enjoyed the rare silence of the house. The next day, a Wednesday, I left work an hour early. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw it. A small, elegant-looking box sitting on my doorstep. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, addressed simply to Ryan. The return address was a generic print shop in the next town over. Taped to the top was a small gift tag. "From your friends at work. Congrats." It felt off. My colleagues had already given me a gift card at the office party. But I brushed it off, took the package inside, and placed it on the kitchen counter. I went through my usual routine, sorted the mail, drank a glass of water. But the box seemed to be staring at me. Finally, I grabbed a knife, slit the tape, and opened it. Inside, nestled in a bed of black tissue paper, was a single, featureless flash drive. Taped to its smooth plastic casing was a small, folded piece of paper. My fingers felt numb as I unfolded it. For words, printed in neat, impersonal block letters. "Thought you should see this." A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in my stomach. This wasn't a gift. It was a threat. My hands were shaking as I walked to my home office. I sat down, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I plugged the drive into my laptop. A single video file appeared on the screen. The file name was a random jumble of letters and numbers. I stared at it for a full minute, a war raging inside me. Part of me screamed to just throw it away, to not know, to preserve the fragile piece of my ignorance. But the bigger part of me, the part that had always been the observer, the analyst, needed to see the truth. I double-clicked, My world didn't just end. It was unmade, disassembled piece by piece in the flickering light of the screen. The video was shaky, obviously filmed on a phone in a loud, crowded bar. I could hear Tasha's high-pitched laughter from behind the camera, egging them on. And then I saw them. My fiancée, Emma, her hair messy, her face flushed with alcohol and excitement. And my brother, Jason, his arms snaked around her waist, pulling her tight. They were laughing, shouting over the music. And then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a drunken peck. It was a deep, consuming kiss, full of a desperate, ugly hunger. The camera didn't flinch. It zoomed in, capturing every damning detail. The video continued, showing more things that burned themselves onto the back of my eyelids. Images of a betrayal so profound it defied language. The roaring sound of the bar faded away, replaced by the roaring in my own ears. I didn't shout. I didn't throw my laptop against the wall. I just sat there, my body turning to ice. As the man I was, the happy, trusting, future-facing Ryan, bled out on the floor of my office. The grief was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. The rage was a white-hot nova. And then, it was all gone. The storm inside me passed, and in its wake was a silence. A profound, terrifying, and powerful silence. A cold clarity settled over me. I ejected the flash drive, its plastic warm against my cold skin. It felt like a piece of plutonium, small but capable of immense destruction. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop again, created a new, heavily encrypted folder, and named it simply Consequence. I copied the video file into it. The plan hadn't fully formed yet, but I knew its purpose. They had built their world on my trust, my stability, my quiet love. They had used my heart as their playground. Well, recess was over. I was about to teach them the meaning of consequence. Before you can understand the cold precision of my next moves, you have to understand the 30 years of kindling that fed the fire. My reaction wasn't just about a single act of infidelity. It was about a lifetime of being the supporting actor in someone else's movie. This was the final scene of a long, slow tragedy, and I was finally rewriting the ending. Let me take you back, to show you the cracks in the foundation they never saw. I was 10 years old. It was my birthday, and all I wanted was a specific, top-of-the-line telescope. I had spent months reading astronomy books from the library, drawing star charts, and dreaming of seeing Saturn's rings for myself. I dropped hints for weeks. My parents smiled and nodded. On my birthday morning, I tore open my big present. It was a telescope, yes, but it was a cheap, plastic department store model. It was fine. I tried to hide my disappointment. "Thanks," I mumbled. "It's great." My dad clapped me on the shoulder. "That's my practical boy. No need for all those fancy bells and whistles." A month later, it was Jason's 9th birthday. He'd decided he wanted to be a rock star and had been banging on a tennis racket for a week. My parents bought him a brand new, top-of-the-line electric guitar and a powerful amplifier that shook the entire house. Cost 3 times as much as my telescope. My dad beamed as Jason made a horrible screeching noise. "That's my son, the artist. You have to nurture that kind of passion." I sat in my room that night with my flimsy telescope, unable to even find the moon clearly, listening to the cacophony downstairs, and I learned a fundamental lesson. My quiet passions were hobbies. His fleeting whims were art. This dynamic only got worse as we got older. Fast forward to college graduation. I'd busted my hump for 4 years, working a job waiting tables to minimize my student loans, and I'd graduated magna cum laude in finance. It was a huge achievement for me. My graduation dinner was at a local chain restaurant. My father raised a glass of beer. "To Ryan," he said, his tone pleasant but void of any real excitement. "Always a hard worker. We're proud of you. Now, let's not be too late. Everyone has to be sharp for Jason's big day tomorrow." He gave me a brisk handshake and a pat on the back. My mother's hug was quick. "That's lovely, dear. Now, is your suit pressed for tomorrow? It's a very important day for your brother." Jason's graduation the following day. He'd scraped by with a C average in business marketing, was treated like a national holiday. My parents rented a private room at the city's best steakhouse. There were balloons, there were endless toasts, and the centerpiece of it all was parked right outside. A gleaming, cherry-red convertible, a massive bow stuck to the windshield. Jason didn't even look surprised. He just grinned, slapped the roof and said, "About time." The implication was clear. This wasn't a gift. It was his birthright. My dad slung a heavy arm around Jason's shoulders, his voice booming with pride for the whole restaurant to hear. "This is my son, the deal-maker. He's got the killer instinct. He's going to take the world by storm." I stood off to the side, sipping a glass of champagne that had gone flat, and the feeling of being invisible was so profound it was almost a physical sensation. It wasn't the car. It was the flagrant, unapologetic disparity. His potential was an investment. My achievements were line items on a checklist. And the professional world was no different. A few years into my career, I was working at a mid-level financial firm, absorbing everything I could. I spent my nights and weekends not at bars, but in front of my computer, building complex investment models, teaching myself the intricacies of the market. I identified a niche opportunity in sustainable energy futures, and I developed a comprehensive investment strategy around it. It was innovative, well-researched, and I was immensely proud of it. I made the colossal mistake of sharing it with my dad over a Sunday barbecue, walking him through my data, my voice full of passion. He seemed genuinely impressed. "Wow, Ryan, this is really smart stuff." The following weekend, at a family dinner, my dad cleared his throat and made an announcement. "Everyone, some exciting news. Jason has decided to branch out on his own. He's starting a new investment project." My blood ran cold. Jason, looking impossibly smug, then stood up and proceeded to present a butchered, dumbed-down version of my plan as his own. He got the terminology wrong and couldn't answer basic questions, but the core idea was unmistakably mine. My parents and Emma looked at him with stars in their eyes. "Oh, Jason, that's just brilliant," my mother gushed. "You always had such a wonderful head for business." I looked at Emma, my girlfriend of 3 years at that point, pleading with my eyes for her to see the injustice. She just smiled, squeezed my hand under the table, and whispered, "It's so amazing how ambitious your family is. You're both so talented." It was a knife twist. She wasn't just ignoring the theft. She was normalizing it. She was absorbing my individual achievement into the collective mythology of the amazing Nom Boys, a club where Jason was the president and I was, apparently, the silent, uncredited research department. The only person who ever saw the truth clearly was my best friend, Mark. We'd been friends since we were 5. After that dinner, I drove to his apartment, the anger and humiliation a physical sickness in my stomach. I didn't even have to say much. He took one look at my face and knew. He handed me a cold beer. "Let me guess," he said, his voice laced with tired anger. Jason just invented something amazing, and it sounded vaguely familiar. I just nodded, unable to speak. "Dude, you have to stop giving them your gold," he said, his voice firm. "They don't value it. They just melt it down and use it to make another trophy for his shelf. They don't deserve your brilliance." He was right. I knew he was, but they were my family. How do you just stop? There was one other person. My grandfather, my mom's dad. He was a carpenter, a man of few words but profound wisdom. He passed away when I was 25, but before he did, he gave me a gift more valuable than any inheritance. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, he'd waved my parents and a restless Jason out. He wanted to speak to me alone. His hand, rough and calloused from a lifetime of shaping wood, felt surprisingly strong as it gripped mine. His voice was a dry, reedy whisper. "Ryan," he rasped, his eyes, clear and sharp to the very end, locked on mine. "Your father is a good man, a good heart, but with money, with value, he's blind. He sees the flash, not the substance. You have my head for this stuff. You see the grain of the wood." He paused, taking a rattling breath. Look after them, he pleaded. They're family. But you listen to me now. You look after yourself first. Don't you ever let them make you feel small. Don't you dare let them forget what you are worth. I had tried to honor both parts of his wish. I did look after them, in ways they couldn't possibly comprehend. I took the small inheritance he left me, and over the years I grew it. When my parents asked me to take a look at their meager retirement savings, I didn't just look. I took over, silently, expertly, turning their puddle into a small lake. I became their financial guardian angel, never seeking credit because it was easier to let Jason wear the crown. Kept the peace. So, as I sat in my car at that desolate rest stop, hours from home, the damning video looping in my memory, all these ghosts came back to me. The cheap telescope, the stolen idea, my grandfather's dying words. This wasn't just about Emma sleeping with Jason. This was about all of them, collectively, taking my life's work, my quiet dedication, my very worth, and treating it like it was nothing. The pain was a physical weight in my chest. But something else was there, too. A strange sense of lightness. The burden of being the good son, the peacekeeper, had been lifted. They had finally pushed me too far. They had reminded me of the second part of my grandfather's wish. It was time to look after myself first. I picked up my burner phone. I scrolled past the names of my family, each one a small monument to a past I was now leaving behind. I found Mark's name and pressed call. He answered immediately, as I knew he would. "Hey, you good? It's over," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. "All of it." There was a beat of silence. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice a steady anchor in my storm. "Driving. I don't know where I'm going yet, but I'm gone." "Okay," he said, his calm a lifeline. "Okay, man. Just be safe. Call me when you land. We'll figure out the rest." I hung up. I pulled my real phone out of the glove compartment, turned it off and snapped the SIM card in half. The tiny crunch was satisfying. The escape was real, and the war had just begun. The first 24 hours were a masterclass in controlled demolition. I holed up in a generic, soulless motel off a highway in a town I couldn't name. The kind of place with scratchy towels and a faint smell of disinfectant. With cash, I bought a new burner phone and a cheap laptop. Sleep was a foreign concept. Instead, I sat in the buzzing fluorescent light of the room, fueled by bitter coffee and a cold, clarifying rage. Raw anger was a blunt instrument. What I needed was a scalpel. My first objective was to dismantle the wedding. It was the public face of our shared life, the symbol of the future they had desecrated. It had to be the first thing to burn. I opened the new laptop, accessed the cloud drive where our wedding Bible, a master spreadsheet of vendors, contacts, and payment schedules, was stored, and I began to make the calls. My first call was to the venue, a picturesque estate with sprawling gardens and a price tag to match. A cheerful event coordinator named Brenda answered. "Good morning. This is Ryan Johnson." I began, my voice a carefully modulated, calm baritone. "I'm calling in reference to the Johnson-Hamilton wedding scheduled for next month." "Oh, Mr. Johnson." "Yes, we're so excited. I was just about to call you about the final menu selections," she chirped. "There's been a change of plans, Brenda," I said smoothly. "We need to cancel the event." The silence on the other end was thick with confusion. Cancel? But is everything all right? We're well past the cancellation deadline for a full refund. "Everything is perfectly fine," I lied, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. "Unforeseen personal circumstances. As for the deposit, I understand it's non-refundable, but the secondary deposit, as per our contract, is refundable with a 10% penalty. Please process that and send the remaining balance to the following account." I gave her the details of a new, untraceable bank account I'd set up that morning. An account that was mine and mine alone. She stammered, apologized, and agreed. One call down. The first domino had tipped. Next, the photographer, a hipster artist who charged an obscene amount to capture authentic moments. Then the caterer, the band, the florist. The call to the bakery that was making our 5-tier wedding cake was almost comical. "You want to cancel the eternal love cake?" the baker asked, sounding personally offended. "That's right," I said. "The eternal love is officially dead." With each call, I felt a piece of my old life being surgically removed. It was a hollow, painful process, but with each amputation, a strange sense of empowerment grew in its place. I was no longer the victim of their story. I was the editor cutting out the characters who no longer served the plot. By mid-afternoon, the shockwaves began to hit home. My burner phone, whose number I had given only to Mark, started buzzing. A text from him. "There's a full-blown Category 5 meltdown here. Emma has called me 5 times, hysterical. Jason left a rambling, incoherent voicemail. Your parents called my parents. They're telling everyone you've had a nervous breakdown and have gone missing." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. A nervous breakdown. It was so perfectly them, to frame my departure as a symptom of my weakness, rather than a consequence of their actions. Let them. The truth had a way of clearing things up. It was time to deploy the truth. My next move was aimed at our social circle, the network of friends and acquaintances who lived in the warm glow of Jason's charm and Emma's sweetness. I composed a new email. The subject line was stark. "This is why I'm gone." The body of the email was concise. To my friends, I know many of you are worried or have heard rumors. I didn't have a breakdown. I had a revelation. I'm sorry you have to see this, but you deserve to know the truth. Below the text, I attached the video file. No further explanation was necessary. The video spoke for itself. I sent it to a carefully selected list of 5 mutual friends, people I knew to be decent, loyal, and, most importantly, discreetly influential. It was a digital time bomb, and I had just set the timer. Now, for the serpent in the garden, Tasha. I knew she was the catalyst. Her fingerprints were all over this. A few hours later, Mark sent me confirmation. He forwarded a screenshot from the wedding party's group chat. A concerned bridesmaid had asked Tasha what on earth had happened at the party. Tasha's reply was a masterwork of feigned innocence. "OMG, you guys. It was awful. Emma got so drunk. She just threw herself at Jason. I tried to pull her away, but she was completely out of control. I feel absolutely terrible for Ryan. My heart is broken for him." But Mark, my ever-vigilant ally, sent a second screenshot. This one was from a trusted groomsman who had been out with Jason the night after the party. The groomsman had seen a DM on Jason's phone from Tasha. He'd been so disgusted he'd snapped a picture of it. "Hope you had as much fun as I did watching, winky face. She doesn't deserve a great guy like you. You know who does?" The pieces clicked into place. Tasha hadn't just filmed the event. She'd produced it. She'd gotten Emma drunk, pushed her towards Jason, and created the very scandal she was now pretending to be horrified by. That flash drive hadn't been an accident. It was a weapon deliberately placed for me to find. She wanted to burn Emma's life down, not for me, but for her own chance to claim the prize. The golden boy, Jason. With the social groundwork laid, it was time for the final, most devastating strike of the initial assault. Emma's parents, the Hamiltons. They were good, decent people, but their values were carved from the stone of a different era. They were deeply religious, intensely private, and prized honor, reputation, and family integrity above all else. They loved me. They saw me as the steady, reliable man who would provide their only daughter with a safe and respectable life. They were about to learn that the life they envisioned was a lie. This was the move of no return. This was the one that would not just end a wedding, but would detonate the very core of Emma's world. I'll be honest with you, I hesitated. My finger hovered over the send button for what felt like an hour. A voice inside me, the voice of the old Ryan who always smoothed things over, screamed at me to stop. This was too much. This was cruel. This would break her parents' hearts and annihilate her. Then, I closed my eyes, and the video played in my head. I saw Emma's laughing face as she betrayed me. I saw my brother's smug entitlement. I heard my grandfather's voice. "Don't you dare let them forget what you are worth." I remembered the photograph on my nightstand, the one from our anniversary trip to the lake. We were both smiling, the picture of happiness. That man in the photo was a fool. A trusting, loving, naive fool. And he was dead. I had to honor his death by living a life of truth. A single tear, hot and sharp, traced a path down my cheek. It was the last one I would ever shed for Emma or the life we were supposed to have. I wiped it away with the back of my hand, my jaw set like concrete. I opened a new email draft. To Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton. Subject: the truth about the wedding. The body of the email was brutally efficient. Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton, I am writing to you with the deepest regret. I am canceling our wedding. The reason is contained in the video linked below. I am so sorry that you have to see this, but I believe you deserve to know the real character of the man your daughter was with, and the real character of your daughter. I included the link to the private video, and I attached one more thing, a PDF of my recent health screening showing a clean bill of health. A subtle but clear message that I had been faithful. I took a deep breath and clicked send. The gentle whoosh of the email leaving my outbox was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a bridge being dynamited. It was the sound of a carefully constructed world being turned to ash. The storm had been fully unleashed. I had no idea what the wreckage would look like, but I knew I wouldn't be the one buried under it. The days that followed were an exercise in disciplined silence on my part. From the sterile quiet of my new motel room, I watched the digital storm I'd created, with Mark as my unwilling weatherman. His texts were my only connection to the life I had incinerated, each one a small explosion. The Hamiltons have gone dark. Emma's been calling them nonstop. They're not picking up. She went to their house and they wouldn't open the door. That's way scarier than yelling. Your parents are in full damage control mode. Your dad is telling everyone you're unstable. Jason tried to float the idea that the video was a deepfake. It didn't work. Too many people were there. It's spreading. Fast. People I barely know are talking about it. But I wasn't just hiding and watching the fires burn. That would have been passive. The old Ryan was passive. The new Ryan was a builder. While their world was imploding, I was meticulously laying the foundations for my new one. I wasn't just a scorned man. I was a professional with a valuable skill set. It was time to leverage it. I made the call to my boss, the CEO of my firm, Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis was a formidable man in his mid-60s, sharp as a tack and with a built-in aversion to bullshit. He valued two things: loyalty and results. I had always given him both. Ryan, he answered on the second ring. His voice as crisp as a new $100 bill. My assistant said you were taking some personal time. I trust everything is in order. There's been a significant family emergency, sir, I said, my voice calm and measured. The wedding has been called off. I'll need a couple of weeks to manage the fallout, but I want to assure you that my work won't suffer. I've already prepared and forwarded the contingency plans for the quarterly review. I could practically hear him nodding, an expression of approval. I'm sorry to hear that, son. A broken engagement is a terrible thing. You take the time you need. Your work has always been first-rate. If the company can be of any assistance, don't hesitate to ask. This was my opening. Actually, sir, I ventured, the bold idea that had been simmering now coming to a boil. This situation has forced me to do a lot of personal asset restructuring. It's illuminated where my real strengths lie, far beyond my current job description. It was a carefully planted seed, a hint of a greater ambition. Is that so? He replied, and I could hear a distinct note of interest in his voice. Intriguing. When you get back on your feet, Ryan, let's have lunch. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts. We hung up. A jolt of adrenaline, clean and pure, shot through me. It was the feeling of control. I was no longer just reacting to the past. I was actively building a new future, a future they couldn't touch. But just as I started to feel a sliver of safety, the past reached out for me. My phone buzzed with an email alert from the loyalty program of the hotel chain I was staying at. The subject line was chilling. Security alert. A login to your account was attempted from an unrecognized device. The location of the device. My home city. My blood turned to ice. Jason, of course. He knew I traveled for work, knew I was a loyalty member. He was trying to track me down. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This felt like being hunted. I was packed and out of that motel in less than 3 minutes. My heart pounded against my ribs as I threw my bag in the car. I called Mark from the road, my voice tight. He's trying to find me. They're actively looking. I need to disappear completely. I have a place, Mark said instantly, his voice a calm harbor in my panic. My family's old fishing cabin, up in the Berkshire Mountains. It's primitive. No cell service, the Wi-Fi is barely functional. No one's been there in years. No one knows about it but me. I'll text you the coordinates to your burner. The drive north was a multi-hour blur of tension. Every car in my rearview mirror felt like a threat. The cabin was a godsend, a fortress of solitude nestled deep in the woods. It smelled of pine needles, damp earth, and old memories. For 2 days I breathed. The silence was absolute, broken only by the wind whispering through the tall trees. I felt safe. That safety was shattered on the 3rd day by the crunch of tires on the gravel road leading to the cabin. I froze, my body going rigid. Mark was the only soul on earth who knew this location. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from beside the cold fireplace, my pulse thudding in my ears, and flattened myself against the wall next to the door. A car door slammed. A familiar voice called out, "Ryan? It's me, Tuan. Mark told me where you were." He was worried. Tuan, my cousin. The family's Switzerland, always neutral, always observing. I slowly, cautiously, opened the door. He stood there, his face a mask of genuine concern. My tense shoulders relaxed a fraction. "I can't believe it, man," he said, stepping inside and shaking his head. "What they did, it's unforgivable. The whole family is in chaos." He was brilliant. For a full hour, he played his part perfectly. He let me talk, he listened, he nodded in all the right places. He validated my anger, my pain. He made me feel like I had an ally within the family, a bridge back to some semblance of normalcy. I let my guard down. And then he made his move. He leaned forward, his expression shifting from sympathy to serious negotiation. "Listen, Ryan," he said, his voice dropping. "I talked to your dad. He's a broken man. Your mom, she hasn't stopped crying for days. They're devastated." He paused, letting that sink in. "What Jason and Emma did was monstrous. There's no excuse. But you going scorched earth like this, airing our family's dirty laundry for the whole world to see, it's destroying the family reputation. Your grandparents' name. People are talking, Ryan. It's a public embarrassment." I stared at him, my hand tightening on the poker I still held. The word embarrassment echoed in the quiet cabin. "What we need to do," he continued, his voice now a conspiratorial whisper, "is contain this. Handle it in-house. You need to come home. We'll have a big family meeting. A summit. Jason will apologize on his knees if he has to. You and Emma can, well, you can figure that out. But the key is we present a united front to the world. We shut down the gossip. For the good of the family. For the good of the family. Not for my good. Not for the sake of justice. For the good of the image. To save face. To avoid the inconvenience of public shame. He wasn't an ally. He was a PR agent. A fixer, dispatched by my father to mitigate the damage, to convince me to bury my own integrity for the sake of their comfort. He was just one more person telling me that my profound personal pain was secondary to their social standing. The very last, fragile thread connecting me to that family snapped. My resolve, which had been tempered by a sliver of hope, was now quenched in ice, hardening into something sharp and unbreakable. "You should go, Tuan," I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of all the emotion he had so expertly tried to manipulate. "Ryan, just think about it," he pleaded, realizing he was losing me. "It's the right thing to do." I said, cutting him off. A cold, bright idea flashed in my mind. And you're right. The meeting is a great idea. In fact, you can go back and tell my father that I'll be there. I have a few things I'd like to discuss with everyone. Face to face. A wave of relief washed over his face. He thought he'd won. Fantastic. That's the right move, Ryan. I'll go let him know right now. He left, practically beaming, convinced of his diplomatic victory. He had no idea what he had really accomplished. He hadn't brought the prodigal son back to the fold. He had just delivered the enemy an invitation to their own execution. The living room of my childhood home felt like a stage set for a tragedy. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and the cloying scent of my mother's potpourri. I hadn't set foot in this house in what felt like an eternity, and yet nothing had changed. The same family portraits on the mantelpiece, smiling their dishonest smiles. The same grandfather clock in the hall, ticking away the seconds towards a judgment it couldn't foresee. They were all there, a jury of my tormentors. My father, ensconced in his throne-like leather armchair, had arranged his face into a mask of stern disappointment. My mother, perched on the edge of the sofa, was the picture of a grieving matriarch, a tissue clutched in her hand. Emma sat beside her, pale and diminished, a ghost of the vibrant woman I had planned to marry. And Jason, my brother, was pacing like a caged panther, all his usual swagger gone, replaced by a raw, twitchy desperation. My cousin Tuan stood near the fireplace, looking pleased with himself, the self-appointed peacemaker. The moment I walked in, all conversation ceased. I didn't greet them. I simply walked to the empty armchair that faced my father, the one reserved for guests, and sat down. I placed a slim, black leather portfolio on the coffee table between us. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. My father, as always, appointed himself the spokesman. "Ryan," he began, his voice laced with a performative gravitas. "Thank you for finally seeing reason. This public spectacle has gone on long enough. You have caused this family a great deal of pain and embarrassment." I met his gaze, my own expression unreadable. "Embarrassment?" I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "That's what you think my pain is? An inconvenience? What your brother did was a mistake," my mother interjected, her voice rising with a quaver of indignation. "A foolish, drunken mistake. But families are supposed to forgive. You don't tear a family apart over one mistake." Emma took that as her cue, launching into a sob story that was clearly rehearsed. "Ryan, I am so sorry," she choked out, tears tracing paths through her foundation. "I wasn't myself that night. Tasha, she just kept handing me drinks, and Jason, it just happened. But I love you. I've always loved you. We can get past this. I know we can." Jason finally stopped his pacing, running a hand through his perfectly messy hair. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate plea, but there was no genuine remorse there, only the primal fear of consequence. "I messed up, bro, okay? I messed up bad. I was an idiot. I'll do anything to make it right. Just tell me what to do." I let their symphony of excuses and self-serving apologies fade into the ticking of the clock. I surveyed their faces one by one. They didn't see me. They saw a problem to be managed, a rogue variable that was disrupting their comfortable equation. I leaned forward slowly and opened the portfolio. "I'm not here to discuss the video," I said. The shock that rippled through the room was palpable. This wasn't the confrontation they had prepared for. "We all know what's on it. I'm here to talk about business. A family business." I slid a thick, professionally bound document across the polished surface of the table. It stopped directly in front of my father. "Do you recognize this?" He picked it up, his brow furrowing as he read the cover page. "The Nam Family Trust. What is this?" "That," I said, my voice as cold and hard as polished granite, "is the legal entity I established 5 years ago. It was designed to manage your retirement savings. The savings that were languishing in a savings account earning a pathetic 0.5% a year. I designed it to grow that money, to build a fortress that would protect you both in your old age. I shifted my gaze to Jason, who was now staring at the document as if it were a venomous snake. It's the fund you've been so freely dipping into for your investment ventures, Jason. It's the fund that paid for that shiny new convertible you're so proud of. Jason's jaw went slack. My father looked from the document to me, his confusion warring with his ingrained disbelief. What are you talking about? Jason handles our investments. He's got a natural talent for it. He's done a fantastic job. A small, bitter smile touched my lips. No, I said, shaking my head with an exaggerated slowness. Jason was listed as a beneficiary with limited withdrawal privileges, which required my sign-off. A sign-off I foolishly gave every time he asked. I was the founder, the trustee, and the sole manager. I was the one who spent countless nights and weekends of my own unpaid time, making the trades, analyzing the markets, and turning your initial $60,000 investment into the $750,000 it's worth today. The number dropped into the silent room like a boulder into a still pond. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. Emma's eyes widened, a flicker of something new and terrifying in them. Calculation. My father, however, defaulted to his lifelong programming. Denial and scorn. He laughed, a short, barking sound. You? Don't be absurd, Ryan. You're a junior analyst at a downtown firm. What would you possibly know about managing that kind of portfolio? This was it. The moment I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times. The precipice. I met his condescending gaze with a dead calm smile. You're absolutely right, Dad. I'm just a junior analyst. So perhaps you should get a second opinion. From my mentor. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. A moment later, the huge flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace flickered to life. I had connected to it via my phone's hotspot the moment I walked in the door. The stern, professional face of Mr. Davis, my CEO, filled the screen. He was seated behind his large mahogany desk, the picture of corporate power. Mr. Davis, I said, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Could you perhaps clarify for my family the nature of our working relationship and my role at the firm? Mr. Davis looked directly into the camera, his gaze piercing. Good afternoon, he said, his deep voice commanding immediate respect. Ryan, it's my pleasure. To the Nam family, let me be clear. Ryan hasn't been a junior analyst in spirit for over 3 years. He has been my personal protege, one of the sharpest financial minds I've encountered in my 40-year career. He has been covertly managing a high-yield, high-risk fund for a select group of the firm's top executives. His returns have been, to put it mildly, extraordinary. When he mentioned to me in passing that he was managing a small family trust pro bono, I wasn't surprised in the least. It's in his DNA. The color drained from my father's face as if a plug had been pulled. My mother stared at the screen, her hand covering her mouth. But I wasn't done. I reached into the portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper, sliding it across the table. This is a copy of the trust's bylaws, Dad. I'd like to draw your attention to Article 4, Section 2. I've highlighted it for you. It's called the Morality Clause. My father's hand trembled as he reached for the paper. I didn't need him to read it. I recited it from memory, my voice a death knell. The trust and all assets therein shall be immediately and irrevocably dissolved, and all assets shall revert to the sole and exclusive ownership of the founder, Ryan Nam, in the event that any immediate family member or their betrothed engages in an act of gross moral turpitude, including but not limited to infidelity, criminal activity, or any act which brings public shame and disrepute upon the family name. I leaned back, letting the words sink in. The video was proof of moral turpitude. Sending it to our friends and, more importantly, to the Hamiltons made that shame public. The contract is broken. You broke it. I turned my attention back to the screen. So, Mr. Davis, as we discussed this morning, have the dissolution papers been filed with the state? They have, Ryan, Mr. Davis confirmed, his face impassive. As of 9:05 a.m. today, the Nam Family Trust officially ceased to exist. All assets, totaling $754,212.41, have been successfully transferred to a new private wealth account under your sole and exclusive control. The wrecking ball had not just hit the house. It had pulverized the foundations. My father looked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound emerged. All the bluster, all the patriarchal authority, had just vanished, leaving a terrified, bewildered old man in its place. My mother was openly weeping now, not for her son's pain, but for her lost security. Emma was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated horror, the face of someone who just realized she hadn't just cheated on her fiancé. She had thrown away a winning lottery ticket worth millions in future earnings. And Jason, my golden brother, he finally collapsed onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands, his body shaking. The sun around which they had all orbited had just been extinguished, revealed to be nothing but a hollow, gilded prop, paid for by the brother he had spent a lifetime trying to eclipse. The power in that room had not just been rearranged. It had been conquered, and I was its new king. With a final, curt nod, Mr. Davis spoke. "Ryan, I will leave you to your family business. My office will be in touch tomorrow to discuss the new fund." "Well done." The screen went black. The sudden absence of his authoritative presence made the silence in the room feel even heavier, like a physical weight pressing down on all of us. The only sound was the frantic ticking of the grandfather clock and my mother's thin, ragged weeping. For a full minute, no one moved or spoke. The reality of their new, impoverished future was a chasm that had opened at their feet, and they were all staring into it, paralyzed. My father, a man who had never been at a loss for words, looked shrunken in his big leather chair. He stared at the blank TV screen, then at the useless trust document in his trembling hand, then finally at me. His eyes were wide with a desperate, pleading confusion. He wasn't just looking at his son. He was looking at the architect of his ruin. He finally found a voice, but it was a pathetic, reedy version of his usual boom. You can't. That's our money, Ryan. Our retirement. Our future." "No," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, sharp and final. "It was your money. More accurately, it was your seed money. I was the farmer who tilled the soil, planted the seed, and tended the crop. You were to be the beneficiaries of the harvest. But you let the wolves into the field. You broke the contract. The deal is off." I pushed myself to my feet, the motion feeling slow, deliberate, final. In a flash, Emma was off the couch, her face a desperate, tear-streaked mask. She lunged forward and grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my sleeve. Her touch was repellent, like ice and fire at once. "Ryan, please," she begged, her voice a frantic, ugly whine. "Please don't do this. We can fix this. I swear. I'll never speak to him again. We can still get married. We can have that money, that life, our life." I looked down at her hand, this hand I had once dreamed of holding for the rest of my life. Then I looked into her eyes. There was no love there, no remorse for the pain she'd caused me. There was only the raw, animal panic of a gambler who had just lost everything on a stupid, reckless bet. She wasn't mourning me. She was mourning the lifestyle I represented. I unclasped her fingers from my arm, one by one, as if removing a parasite. "There is no we, Emma," I said, my voice soft but devoid of any warmth. "There is no our life. You made your choice in that bar with my brother. This is just the consequence. I sincerely wish you the life that you have earned for yourself." I turned my back on her and faced Jason. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was still huddled on the couch, his head in his hands, the picture of self-pity. "You had the world, Jason," I said, my voice flat. "The world handed to you on a silver platter, a platter that I paid for, and you traded it all for a 5-minute thrill. I hope it was worth it." Finally, I looked at my parents. My mother looked up at me, her face a roadmap of confusion and betrayal. "Why?" she whispered, the question a summary of her entire life's willful blindness. "Why would you do this? Why would you destroy your own family?" I looked at this woman, my mother, and felt a sudden, profound wave of pity. Not for her, but for the son she never bothered to know. "I didn't destroy this family," I said, my voice softening almost imperceptibly. "I just balanced the books. For 30 years, my account with this family has been overdrawn. I made endless deposits of love, respect, my ideas, my time, my talent. And in return, I received withdrawals of neglect, dismissal, and disrespect. Today, the account is closed. The debt is settled." The financial metaphor was deliberate. It was the only language of value they truly understood. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was a final, clean transaction. I turned and walked towards the front door, the polished wood floorboards creaking under my feet. "Where are you going?" my father called out, his voice raspy with defeat. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the cool brass doorknob, but I didn't turn around. I didn't want the last image of them to be their broken faces. I wanted it to be the back of my head as I walked away. "I'm going to my life," I said to the door. "The one I built. The one I've earned." I stepped over the threshold, out into the cool afternoon air, and pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me. The solid, final click of the latch was the sweetest, most liberating sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a prison door locking, with all my jailers trapped inside. As I walked down the familiar driveway, I didn't rush. I took my time. I passed the basketball hoop where Jason had always beaten me because he was bigger and more aggressive. I passed the flower beds my mother tended with more care than she ever tended my feelings. I passed the garage that housed my sensible sedan, parked next to the empty space where Jason's convertible used to be. I got in my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb without a single glance in the rearview mirror. I was driving away from the rubble of a dynasty built on lies. I had been the silent architect of its prosperity. It was only fitting that I was the public agent of its demolition. The air through the open window felt cleaner, the sun felt warmer, and the road ahead was, for the first time in my entire life, completely and totally my own. A year can feel like a decade when you spend it intentionally rebuilding from the ground up. The first few months were a blur of logistics and quiet introspection. I moved 3 states away, to a vibrant city where the skyline was a testament to ambition and the anonymity was a balm to my soul. Here, I wasn't Ryan, the wronged brother. I was just Ryan. Mr. Davis was a man of his word and then some. He didn't just give me a promotion. He created a new division for me, the Special Investment Projects Group. It was a small, elite team and I was at its head. My new job was to do for the firm's biggest clients what I had done for my family. Find hidden value, nurture it, and make it grow. The work was demanding, exhilarating, and deeply satisfying. I was finally being recognized and rewarded for the skills I had been forced to hide for so long. My personal life underwent a similar renovation. I sold the suburban house, the site of so much quiet misery, and bought a spacious condo on the 30th floor of a downtown high-rise. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a constant reminder that the world was vast and full of possibilities beyond the claustrophobic confines of my old life. I started taking care of myself. I joined a gym not to get huge but to feel strong. I started cooking, finding a meditative peace in chopping vegetables and learning new recipes. I was rediscovering myself, or perhaps meeting myself for the very first time. Dating was something I approached with extreme caution. The wound of Emma's betrayal was a deep scar, and I was wary of letting anyone get that close again. Then I met Sarah. I was at an art gallery opening, something the old Ryan never would have done, and she was standing in front of a chaotic, abstract painting, looking completely serene. She was an architect, a builder of things. Our first few dates were cautious. On our 4th date, over a bottle of wine at a quiet Italian restaurant, I decided to tell her. I laid out the whole ugly story, from the bachelorette party to the family meeting. I expected her to be horrified, to see me as damaged goods, a man defined by his revenge. When I finished, the story hanging in the air between us, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, she simply reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "That doesn't sound like a story about revenge, Ryan," she said, her voice soft but sure. "It sounds like a story about survival. It sounds like you survived a hurricane, and you had to blow up the wreckage to get to shore." To be seen, truly seen, in that way, it was a profound and healing moment. That year, Thanksgiving was the first I had ever spent away from my family. In the past, the thought would have been tinged with a sad loneliness. This year, it was liberating. I decided to host at my new condo. The guest list was small but potent. Mark and his wife, my steadfast allies, drove down, filling my home with easy, genuine laughter. Mr. Davis and his wife came, bringing an incredible bottle of scotch and treating me with a warmth that went far beyond a professional relationship. And Sarah was there, by my side, moving through my kitchen as if it were her own, her presence a quiet, steady flame. As I stood at the head of the table, carving the turkey, I looked at the faces around me. This was my family now, a family of choice, not of obligation. A family built on a foundation of mutual respect, loyalty, and genuine affection. The feeling of belonging was so powerful it almost brought me to my tears. This was real. This was earned. A week later, a thick envelope arrived, forwarded from my old address. The looping, elegant script on the front was unmistakably my mother's. My first instinct was to burn it unopened. Why let their poison into my clean, new world? But a final, morbid curiosity won out. I needed to see the end of their story. I poured myself a glass of that expensive scotch Mr. Davis had brought, sat in my armchair overlooking the city lights, and opened the letter. It was 4 pages long. It was not an apology. It was a strategic, emotional assault. It began with a lengthy, detailed account of their suffering. "Ryan, I don't know if this letter will even reach you, but I pray it does. Your father's spirit has been completely broken. He just sits in his chair all day, staring at the walls. We had to sell the house, Ryan, your childhood home. We now live in a small, cramped apartment on the other side of town. It's humiliating." The letter continued, detailing Jason's plight. "Your brother is a ghost of his former self. His reputation is ruined. No one will hire him. He's fallen into a deep depression. He barely leaves his room. You didn't just take our money, Ryan, you took his future." And then, after 2 pages of painting themselves as the victims, came the blame, sharp and venomous. "We still cannot comprehend the cruelty in your heart. After everything we did for you, how could you be so cold? How could you put money and revenge above your own blood? A family is supposed to be a fortress, but you took a battering ram to our walls. Your father and I have talked, and in our hearts, we are willing to find a way to forgive you for what you've done. It is time for you to come home. It is your duty as a son to help us rebuild the family that you so callously destroyed." I read the entire letter, from the first guilt-laden word to the last manipulative sentence. I searched for the 2 words that could have, perhaps, changed everything. The 2 words that would have shown a flicker of growth, of remorse. "We're sorry." They weren't there. Not even a hint of them. There was no apology for the decades of neglect. No acknowledgement of the pain their favoritism caused. No remorse for the betrayal that shattered my heart. There was only sorrow for their own lost comfort, their own tarnished image. It was the final, irrefutable proof. They hadn't learned a thing. They were incapable of it. Their universe consisted only of themselves, and I was a celestial body who had dared to break from my prescribed orbit. I walked over to the fireplace. The gas logs hissed to life with the flick of a switch. I reread the last line of the letter. "Rebuild the family that you so callously destroyed." A slow smile spread across my face. They still didn't get it. I hadn't destroyed the family. I had exposed it. I crumpled the letter into a tight ball, the paper crinkling in protest. I tossed it into the heart of the blue and orange flames. I watched as the edges curled, turning brown, then black. I watched my mother's elegant handwriting, the words of blame and manipulation, turn to smoke and disappear up the chimney. I was watching the last ghost of my past life turn to ash, and I felt nothing but a profound, cleansing peace. The final tether was severed. I was finally irrevocably free. I stood in front of that fireplace for a long time, watching the last of the embers fade, the scotch in my hand untouched. The city lights twinkled outside my window, a galaxy of other lives, other stories, stretching out to the horizon. It's a strange thing to look back at the most catastrophic event of your life and see it not as a disaster, but as a deliverance. That video, that single, ugly piece of evidence, was not the end of my story. It was the inciting incident. It was the violent, brutal, and absolutely necessary act that shook me from a 30-year slumber. It forced me to become the man my grandfather had seen in me, the man I had kept buried under layers of obligation and a desperate need for approval. The betrayal didn't break me, it forged me. It shattered the comfortable, gilded cage I had mistaken for a home. For my entire life, I had outsourced my sense of self-worth. I let my parents define it with their praise, which they gave so sparingly to me and so lavishly to my brother. I let Emma define it with her love, which turned out to be as shallow as a puddle in the sun. I measured my success by their metrics, not my own. I contorted myself into shapes that were more pleasing to them, making myself smaller so they could feel bigger. Their betrayal was a cruel act, but it gave me an accidental, priceless gift. The permission to finally, unapologetically, choose myself. The cold, systematic campaign of consequence I waged wasn't truly about revenge. It was about reclamation. It was about taking the narrative of my life, which they had controlled for so long, and seizing it for myself. It was about firing the corrupt editors and becoming the sole author of my own story. Today, my value isn't measured by the number in my bank account, though it is substantial. It isn't defined by my job title, though it is prestigious. It isn't validated by a family name that turned out to be a liability. My value, my real worth, is measured in the unwavering loyalty of a true friend like Mark. It's measured in the earned respect of a mentor like Mr. Davis. It's measured in the quiet, steady love of a partner like Sarah, who loves the man I am, not the function I can perform for her. It's measured in the deep, quiet satisfaction of building a life, not on the shifting sands of others' approval, but on the solid bedrock of my own integrity and self-respect. The fire in the hearth was long out, but a different kind of fire burned brightly within me now. Not the consuming fire of rage, but the warm, steady flame of a life lived authentically. The horizon I saw from my 30th floor window was no longer just a view. It was a promise of a future I would continue to build for myself on my own terms. And it was and is beautiful. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's not easy to put these parts of your life out there, but I feel like these stories need to be told. Have you ever been in a situation where the only way to win was to walk away from the game entirely? I'd be genuinely interested to read about your experiences. Please share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next.